What's up, guys? It's Reed, aka Shuda here. Got a pretty sweet hand for you guys that I played a while back. I'm in the big blind here with pocket sixes, and you guys can see I'm playing 1-2 no limit. It's a 6 max table, but there's only 5 people at it right now. The button opens with a min raise, and the big blind against whom I'm quite deep with, about 150 big blinds, a little more, about 160 big blinds effective, goes ahead and re-raises this guy. So first off, before we decide what to do with our sixes, we need to decide what type of range this player has to 3-bet the button opener. So it should be pretty wide, given that the button's going to be calling this raise with a pretty large pot to stack ratio. So a lot of hands like King Jack or King Queen, Ace Jack, stuff like that are in his range, which means he doesn't necessarily have like a polarized range of hands with which he's 3-betting. So he doesn't have just like jacks or better here for value. He's going to have a lot of those in-between types of hands. And whether or not he has a bluffing range in addition to that, it's kind of yet to be seen. But we do know that this player is aggressive enough and understands the game well enough that he is going to have a wider range of hands for value here. So now it comes to us with kind of an in-between hand, pocket sixes. We have a decent hand. We're in position and deep against the re-raiser. So that's going to allow us to do some pretty cool stuff post-flop if we choose. And the button is going to play pretty straightforwardly against whatever we do, just because he's 100 big blinds deep. He knows we're super deep and in position, so he's not really trying to mess with us. Given that we're already kind of sticking our head out to play with the small blind here. So we have a few options. I think folding is kind of marginally bad, but defensible. We could 4-bet as a bluff, probably folding if either player goes all in, or it's going to be pretty difficult to play post-flop unless we're just purely bluffing. So what I decided to do was to call here, and I think there's a lot of cool things that happen when you call a hand that isn't really one that people expect you to call, especially in this type of position. I think a lot of people would give someone who takes my line pre-flop with a cold call here a pretty strong range, like medium pairs like 8s through 10s, maybe even like something as strong as jacks, just because I'm so deep with the small blind. I might not want to get a hand like that in against this player. And some higher Broadway hands like Ace Queen, or maybe Ace King if I'm worried about folding out hands that I dominate, and I already have position anyway on the re-raiser. So like we said, if this guy's re-raising hands like King Jack, maybe cold calling a hand like Ace King could have some merit. So we represent a pretty strong range by calling here, and more importantly, one that isn't really the same as our hand. So it's pretty cool. If we do flop a 6, it's going to be on a weird board a lot of the time, so we'll get paid by inducing a lot of barrels, trying to get us to fold in ace high or like pocket 10s type hand. So let's see how the rest of the hand plays out. We cold call as planned. The flop comes down 3-5 ace, and this dude bets 18. And just from playing with him earlier, I know that his bet sizing is pretty indicative of his hand strength here. And while he shouldn't be betting too large in this spot anyway, I think it's a bit more telling from this opponent. So I would say the top of his range here is probably something like Ace Jack, unless he's trying to do some inducing of his own with a hand like aces or something like that. In which case, we're in trouble, but that's really only one hand out of a ton that we've thought about. So I think we have the best hand pretty often here, and if the board runs out in a certain way, maybe we'll get a little tricky. So we decide to call. I mean, really, we could almost hit a 6. We're just calling to hit a 6 and could be profitable if he's stacking off every time. It's pretty close. So the turn's a 3, which isn't really going to help anyone in the hand, and he checks to us. I think a lot of the time, especially combined with a smaller flop continuation bet, this type of player could be playing a hand like pocket kings in a way where he sees it a bit straightforward. It makes it a bit tougher for us to play a hand kind of funky, because he doesn't think that we're just going to call this flop with like queen 10 suited or something weird that we might have cold called with pre-flop. So he checks, and we decide to get a little out of line here and turn our hand into a bluff. And we already know that it's going to take a couple of streets, but because of the range our opponent is giving us pre-flop, we are expecting to fold out any hand worse than ace queen, and maybe even ace queen if we get the right player. So we bet 52. We don't want to scare him away yet. I think that's kind of like an important part of these types of situations where you get checked to on the turn. A lot of times people like blast the pot, and that isn't really that great because you get your opponent into some sort of situation where he could be check calling a pretty wide range and check folding the river a lot of the time if you bet smaller. But if you bet huge, then you're only making sure he gets to the river with very strong hands. So it's really good if you're in a spot where you only plan on bluffing once. But like I said, we think he's probably trying to induce on this turn. So it's good for us to get a pretty wide range of hands to the river, and then we'll go from there. So the river's a 4, which doesn't really change that much since we're still like repping ace queen or higher, and it doesn't really change much for him unless he just randomly has ace 2 or ace 4. So he checks, and I decided to bet 104, which is probably close to what I would bet if I were value betting. And really we're just trying to fold out ace jack and worse. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if he got looked at by ace jack, just because he could talk himself into it, saying he's underrepresented or he induced us to do whatever, even though it doesn't really make much sense unless we're turning a hand like 6s into a bluff here for us to have a hand worse than ace jack. So he ends up folding, and we take it down. So I hope you guys enjoyed this hand. If you did, please comment on the video here in the YouTube. And if you'd hit the subscribe button, you can check out more hands like this, or follow me on Twitter, and I'll be posting some cool information for you guys. And I hope you like the hand. Take care.